Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the live stream today on a nice snowy day here in Massachusetts. I'm joined today by John King of the Authenticity Institute, and as we're closing up Cybersecurity Awareness Month, I had seen this presentation that John did actually a couple of weeks ago, and I asked him to join me today to give it again because I just thought it's really good topic, really good information, and of course, very timely. John, how are you today? Good to see you.
Real good. Enjoying the snow. So we'll charge on from there. Let me give you a little background, if I could, and how I'd like to try to do this talk today. Is I got involved with the Authenticity Institute probably about 2.5 years ago. And our whole mission is really trying to bring authenticity to the people that are individuals, rather, as well as organizations that show up on the internet or try to access your different types of websites and the like. So what I'm going to do is talk about our big mantra, which is security working for anyone? Right. We've got a real question about that. We've got lots of stuff in the paper about somebody that's hacked into this or hacked into that, or somebody that's lost information and so forth. So we're going to talk about what our belief is on that and move forward. I'm going to stop a couple times because one of the challenges with the webinar is you don't know if people are listening or they have a question and I've talked over something too fast. So I'll stop a couple times and ask if there's any questions. So given that, we'll move on. Right. This cartoon says on the internet that nobody knows you're a dog. And if you think about that, that's really true today, even though this cartoon was originally authored in 1993. So that's 27 years ago, if I do my math right. And it's still true today. You really don't know who you're talking to on the internet. So if you're on Facebook or some other chat function, you really don't know who that person is. They may have a name, but it may not be really who they are, and you don't know what they're about as well. So you've got to be careful. And obviously, if you've got kids that are on social media like that, you've got to be careful as well with them. Just as an example, I have a niece who is a physician. And midway through medical school, she changed her name on Facebook. And she does that today because she really doesn't want to have pictures and things that she may have posted to relate to her. But because she's got patients who may be looking her up and trying to figure out what she's about. So that's one example. And my wife is a teacher. She does the same thing. She's not on Facebook because she doesn't want kids following her with what she's doing. So if I move forward a little bit, the way we look at authenticity is we've got 4 things that reach that point of authenticity. The first is digital signatures everywhere, backed by measurable, reliable identity certificates that are owned by their users, which provide privacy via accountable anonymity. And so if I'm going to go through each one of these, and I'll stop partway along the way to get some questions if there are any to make clarification if that's appropriate.
Sounds good.
So if we go along, the first thing we want to talk about is something called PKI. Now, PKI stands for Puzzle Kit Infrastructure. And what I'm going to do is play a brief video that describes what PKI is about. It's something that's been around for a number of years, but it really hasn't been implemented to the level that we believe it should be. And so we will be talking as we go through this about something called PKI done right. But let's just first start off and talk about what PKI is. So I'll play this video.
Hi, I'm Wes Klismal. On behalf of my PKI colleagues, please accept our apologies for trying to explain PKI using the language of mathematics and cryptography. You don't need any of that confusing stuff to understand the incredible power of the Puzzle Kit infrastructure. In PKI, your phone or other device generates 2 very big numbers. One of the numbers is public, while the other is secret and never leaves your device. For logins, instead of using a password, your username is accompanied by your public number. Using that number, the server makes a puzzle and sends it back. Using the secret number, your device solves the puzzle and sends the solution back to the server. That solution proves that you have the secret number that goes with your public number, and so the server believes your identity claim. Note that if a hacker captures every bit going back and forth, the identity, the public number, the puzzle, the solution to the puzzle, they'll end up with nothing of value. That's because every puzzle made with that public number is different. A solution to a previous puzzle is useless. Besides secure logins with no passwords, PKI gives you true digital signatures. Using the reverse of the login procedure, you make a puzzle out of your document using your secret number. After that, anyone who has your public number can solve the puzzle and know that it was really you who signed it, and that not a single comma has been changed since you signed it. Lastly, PKI makes encryption practical by ensuring that only authorized people have the decryption key that turns your encrypted document from gibberish back into the original. PKI means rock-solid security for password-free login, true digital signatures, and control of decryption keys.
Okay, so PKI is really the basis for which we start to develop authenticity, and we do that through a cryptography type practice. So just think about that as it's a big number that can only be solved by the number that you send back for them to be able to decrypt what's been sent out. So one of the challenges that we have is that I don't know how many of you have been logging on to different sites and things like that, and to try to get established as as somebody who you are. And I'll give you an example that I'm working with an estate situation right now, and I needed to get access to this particular account. And so I worked with the brokerage firm. I called them up, told them my name, told them where I lived, told the situation was. They sent me some forms and said, okay, we can get you in. But they don't know who I am other than my nice voice and my knowledge of what the account number was. And it really wasn't until they got maybe my driver's license number. Well, in Massachusetts, we have situations where we can hand out driver's license numbers. And so again, they don't know who I am. And this is one of the challenges we have with when we're in the banking industry, where we're talking about really synthetic identities. I think you'll find this particular clip pretty interesting.
Here's Tom. Here's Tom's phone. Tom enrolled in online banking using his facial image and fingerprint on his phone. The bank now knows it's him, right? The biometric technology in today's smartphones is really quite good. Here's Tom's financial profile. Oh, look, Tom bought 2 phones. He enrolled each of them in online banking using his facial image and fingerprint on his phone. Here are their financial profiles. Wait, Tom bought 6 more phones. Here are their financial profiles. Ah, the phone store just loves Tom. He just bought 72 more phones. So Tom is now 81 different people. His real self, plus 80 people he created. We'll call them Tommelgangers. Each has a financial profile and financial history. Their banks are pleased to have their business, although those banks don't know that they don't really exist. The Tommelgangers collectively owe millions of dollars. Tom thanks his Tommelgangers for the Ferraris and boats and other trappings of a good life he bought with the credit, but Tom decides that it's getting too much to track and manage. So one day he decides to make the Tommelgangers disappear. Remember 2007 when financial folks started to realize that a lot of A-rated mortgage debt should have been F-rated? And remember 2008 when the debt started hitting the fan? My name is Richard Harry. I've been the head of public company fraud at the Royal Hong Kong Police Force's Public Company and Banking Task Force Division in Hong Kong. I subsequently went to Visa International, where I was head of risk services for the Asia Pacific region in financial payments across a good portion of the globe. And I subsequently spent 7 years at Citibank, where I was global head of fraud risk management for the consumer enterprise globally. In 2003, I came to the US and became fraud risk management director for JP Morgan Chase's consumer enterprise. I've seen a lot of identity fraud in my years in banking, and I think I understand the dimensions of the synthetic identity epidemic. It must be dealt with. Watch some of the other videos here to learn how the measurably reliable identity certificates of the authenticity infrastructure can be used to solve the synthetic identity problem. My authenticity enterprise, Pari Advisory, will help your financial services organization deal with the problem of synthetic identities. Let's fix this problem before the Tommelgangers start hitting your fan.
So just for clarity, the first time I heard this, I was trying to figure out what Tommelganger meant, but we took Tommelganger and we tried to morph it with doppelganger, which is a biologically unrelated lookalike. So that was the message with the Tommelganger, is how we put it together. But think about what the banks are expecting. They think they've got a fingerprint and they've got a picture, and that identifies that individual. But if that person does it again and again with different names, similar financial statements, and he can create up to whatever number of different synthetic identities, the banks don't know that because they haven't gone through the next step, which is really to validate that person's identity further than what they just did by capturing some information off the phone. So that's a challenge that we have, and we're going to talk about how we get measurable, reliable identities in a minute. But that's very key as we go along. The other thing that we want to talk about is digital signatures. Now, when you think digital signatures, you think, well, okay, I scribbled something on a document and it got sent back. I used my mouse to scribe on a document that the bank wanted or somebody wanted, and I sent it back to them, and that was a digital signature. Well, in reality, it's not, because as we view it, that's really an electronic signature. That's a capture of an image. So let's take another quick look here at another topic where we talk about digital signatures and what they mean. So here's a sample of what digital signatures are all about.
Do not confuse digital signatures with electronic signatures, which are simply an image of a handwritten signature. While the signature may claim to represent a real person, there is no reliable assurance that that person actually performed the signing. Personal information used to corroborate identity is vulnerable to our ongoing rampant data breaches. Friends and family may know enough about you to sign fraudulently as you. Court cases are the natural result. Decisions can go either way as judges navigate the twists and turns of logic and intent. The tenuous link to the signer leaves electronic signatures wide open to both impersonation and repudiation. Digital signatures, on the other hand, provide solid assurance that the signature was made by the person claimed, much more solid than an old-fashioned ink signature, not less. Digital signatures are the very fabric of authenticity. Using a document as an example, a digital signature is a combined footprint of both the signer and the document, therefore carrying the authenticity of both. Your secret pen and your public PCN work together like this. A condensed version of the document, called a hash, is encrypted with your secret pen, making a signature that has both the entire document and your identity baked into it. Anyone opening the document uses your public PCN to decrypt the signature and to get the original hash, then makes another hash of the document as it is now. Matching hashes assure the authenticity of both the signer and the document. Any change to the document will cause the hashes not to match, indicating it is not the original document. Secret pens reside on their owner's device and never leave it, maximizing the assurance that a signature created with that pen belongs to that person. You can have different pens for different levels of security, requiring additional verification beyond simple possession, such as a PIN or biometric, at the time of each use. As you can see, digital signatures are the real thing. Electronic signatures are, well, just pretend.
Okay, so let's stop for a minute and see if there's any questions of what I've talked about so far. George, I don't know if we have any questions from the group.
There's no questions in the comments right now.
Okay.
So I think we're good to move on.
All right. So to go back to digital signatures, I don't know how many of you have worked with DocuSign or some other service like that, but if you think about it, when you scribble on that to indicate that you've signed it, we really don't know who signed it. It could be your admin, could be yourself, could be somebody else. And so the idea here is that when we use PKIDR, we're able to identify who actually did that signature. Furthermore, if you think about the idea of a document being mismanaged, think about some of the things you've seen on the internet where you have a politician whose voice has either been altered or has been clipped in different pieces to come up with a new video saying something different than what they actually said, or a reporter that wrote something that got transcribed or at least got clipped out with it. So by using PKIDR, we can, and a certificate, we can determine if the document that was sent out is what was originally authored by the user. And that's really key, because I think in today's world, we've had a lot of challenges with fake news, with snippets of things being taken out of context and the like. So this is a big important step for that. So as we move on, we want to talk about measurable reliable identity certificates. So as I talked about it in the beginning, we're going to determine the reliability of that particular individual. And how do we do that? Well, the first thing we do is we go through and we have a process we call IDQA, which is identity quality. And what we do is we have 8 different domains which we go through and measure the quality of the individual's identity. And we use evidence of identity, which are basically things like government issue pictures, IDs, birth certificates, bank accounts, biometric information, and many other things. And we rate those on a number scale of between 0 to 72. And what comes out of it is when you go through and go through this enrollment process, you end up with an IDQA score, so we can determine and others can determine how reliable your identity is. So if you just had a driver's license or just had an SMS through a telephone, that wouldn't be as much as if you had several other items of evidence of identity. So we do these reviews with a person called an Attestation Officer. Actually, they're a notary who has some additional training, and that person will actually review that individual's documents to attest which is who they are. So in order to do that, we created 2 things. We created what we call our PKIDR phone wallet, which is basically a smartphone. And what it does is it accomplishes this self-enrollment. It also creates a universal identity certificate, and it creates an initial IDQA score. We also created a desktop version, and the desktop version is used to record passwords. Because one of the things that, in fact, George talked to me about it rather sternly and said, John, you can't store all your passwords in Excel. That's not a good method to do that. And I said, well, yeah, but I have all these passwords and they're in Excel. In the PKI desktop solution, what I can do is I can store all my passwords. And because I have a certificate, I don't have to have a password to get into the passwords. And so that gives me an extra level of security that I don't have somebody trying to figure out what my password for my passwords are. And what this would do is let you access any of the sites that you have without having to key in your remember or key in your password. it would also identify you in other situations as well as you try to get into some of your accounts and things like that. So this is a pretty neat feature that we're looking to release.
And just to clarify on that, so even for the PKI desktop, you don't need a password because you have a certificate.
That's correct.
So that makes it, very different from today's traditional password managers that, you put all your information into the password manager and then you lose your password to get into the password manager and all that information is useless.
Right. Well, one of the things that we do when we have an attestation officer involved is they do serve as a backup in the case that you do what I do periodically, which is put my phone through the wash, or maybe lose it or maybe drop it. I never lost it. I think I've always put it through the wash. That has not worked well for me. So this would be a backup in case I had to replace it.
Excellent.
So the way we get started with this is that if you have a smartphone, we'll send you a link and you can then establish your initial identity. And that's really the first step that we go through. And that initial identity is really the phone and an SMS back to you with a code to put in to keep going forward. And so that gets you a very low IDQA score. It says, okay, this person has a phone. They've sent me an email as well. And so I know who they are, sort of. So what I do is I do get a certificate with a low score. I can use that certificate for signing my emails, or I can use it for signing documents. I can use it for also setting up the password situation for myself as well. But it's a low score, and it will show up on when you digitally sign something. It'll show up as a badge indicating what your score is. So what we do to get beyond that is we get involved with an attestation officer, and think of it as a notary. I don't know how many of you, everybody certainly has some experience with a notary in terms of, maybe buying a house or having to get something notarized for something somewhere. But the attestation officer is, if you would, a step up from a standard notary, and they are trained to do an evaluation of all the evidences of identity that you produce, and they record this thing in a video conference, so that we have copies of what actually was presented. We have copies of the statement that the people make when they're going through this, and we have them perform an oath of identity where they basically swear, put their hand up, and they swear that this is me, and some words that go with that. And each document that's presented increases the reliability score if it's deemed appropriate, and the identity badge goes up. So that's what that does for us. And that, as you begin to work with this, you'll see people having identity scores that are higher, and then if we want to go as they produce more information. So any questions before we move on?
There is one question about the IDQA score.
Yep.
Someone wrote in, I'm sorry, I can't tell who it is, but someone wrote in and wanted to know that is all the information that's used to produce that score taken from various public record sources, or are you using some other methods?
Well, some of it's public record, some of it's individual records. We'll look at bank accounts, validate based on a bank account. We will also go out in later stages. We'll go out and do evidence of with peers. We get references of people who you know, so they'll help justify it. So I think if you look at it, it's some public record, some personal records in terms of bank accounts, also reaching out to the community of who you may or may not know and to substantiate who you are. And then I think those are probably the three key areas that we would look at.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. So now they get to the point where the authenticity, the information is owned by their users. And basically what we're saying here is, and this is a little bit of a stretch, I think, as to where we are today versus where we think we want to be. In today's environment, we're pretty much ask for everything everywhere, right? So what we're saying is that down the road, you'll be able to have your own information secured, and you can decide what you want to disseminate. So today, we're pretty free with what we disseminate based on what people ask us for. If you think about when you apply for something, I don't know, if you apply for a mortgage, the amount of information they want to make sure that you're not going to cause a problem for their underwriters is pretty extensive. Credit cards, you can pop pretty quickly nowadays. You get an offer in the mail, you can just sign in for that. And generally, if you got a reasonable credit score, you'll get a card. But we really believe that we need to protect our identity, and we would use the universal certificate as a way of restricting who can get into the information that we have. So that's what we want to do. And if you think about what's happening today, I mean, if you certainly use Google or Bing or whatever you use to go do searches, and then all of a sudden you get an ad from Amazon, or maybe you get an ad from somebody else. Well, I just was thinking about that. I didn't want to go buy it. Mm-hmm. So the problem we have is that we want to try to restrict some of that information from going out to other people. And eventually we'll be at a point where you will have the ability to have your information on a private server, locked up, available through your passwordless database, and your certificate, and be able to share what you want to share out there and not have it open season. So that's real important to think about. So moving along, let's talk about privacy with viability and anonymity. It's a word I have challenges with. So if we think about this, unfortunately that you weren't supposed to see the item in the red below, but think about license plates, okay? And Massachusetts was the first state to have a government issued license plate, 1903. Originally in New York, they had license plates on cars, but they were basically the owner's initials, and they weren't regulated by a government agency. But Massachusetts was the first to do it, so this Frederick Tudor got the first license plate number 1, and apparently his descendants still have that number 1 plate somewhere running around Massachusetts. But the point being is that the license plate identifies who you are, but it doesn't say who you are. So if you're on the highway, you see somebody in front of you that cuts you off and hits you, you don't know who they are, but you know they have a license plate number, and with the help of the courts or the police, you can find out who that person is, because that license plate registers that vehicle. So here's a situation where we have privacy of who we are, but you can get that information if you go through the proper court sequences to do that. So I think that's what we want to try to get to the point where we really have privacy about ourselves when we're on the internet, and other places that we can't necessarily be found out easily. So I've talked about the 4 things that we have for authenticity to make it happen. Digital signatures everywhere, backed by measurable, reliable identity certificates that are owned by their users, which provide privacy via accountable anonymity. So that's really the key message that I wanted to try to get across today. But I thought also it might make some sense to talk about some applied solutions, because so far I've talked about some of the technology, and let's talk about what really we're coming out of this. The first is really this PKIDR Wallet and desktop, and so that will be coming soon, where you'll be able to get an app on a smartphone and be able to do that as signed documents, as well as your passwordless database. Digital signatures come along with that. And the Council of Attestation Officers is where we're training notaries to be able to assessing the evidence of information on an individual. One of the other things that is coming down the road is that I don't know how many of you have used Zoom during the pandemic or some other solution, but the security to get into there is not quite as good as we believe it should be. And that what we have come up with is a solution that we call Placeware, which really is an online meeting environment that requires you to have a certificate, universal certificate through, guess what, PKI, and that lets you into the space so you can meet with people. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. And the other is my own information, which will eventually get to that point. And then finally, I'm sorry. Yeah. Go from there. So let's talk about what I called ABIX properties, which is really the work from home environment, if you would. And so one of the challenges that we have on the left-hand side is really that current work from home environments don't replicate the office. And they limit ad hoc communication, because if you want to meet with somebody, you've got to call them, text them, email them, what have you, and set up a Zoom call or I shouldn't use Zoom. That's become like Coca-Cola, I guess, but for pop, but for soda pop, for those of us that grew up in the Midwest. But the point being is that you can't find them, and it limits this ad hoc communication. You can't walk down the hall to your colleague's desk and knock on the door and say, hey, what's going on? And it doesn't keep unauthorized people out. So those are the challenges. In our ABIX property solution, we replicate your physical office based on your design parameters. We incorporate identity practices. And what we have found is that it improves productivity. It expands your ability to recruit, because if you are based in the Northeast here and you want to get somebody to work for you, but you can't find anybody here, but you put out a national or even an international ad, you can recruit somebody that can come and work for you and be part of this office, virtual office that we're set up. And it reduces your occupancy costs, so you can back off the large office buildings that you have. I've been working with this client with Authenticity Institute for about 3 years, and we have been using a solution like this for ever since I've been involved. And it works pretty well because we have people from all over the world. We had a call the other day, today rather, where we had somebody from India, India. We had people different parts of the state, and as well. So it really works out very well. In fact, this afternoon I just got off a call. We had people from Europe as well as the U.S. and India. So it works very well. So let me go on to the next piece and show you what this looks like. And here's an example of the office. And again, you can configure it any way you want. We just layer in where you access it. So everybody comes in through a lobby, and if they are an employee, they breeze through because they've got some way you got a certificate that lets them in the building. They're able to go to any of the offices that they may want to. My office is down on the bottom, and we have a team conference room that we use all the time, and we store our files there as well. So the files are available based on the level of the IDQA code that the individual has, score that the individual has. So if it's financial information, I have to be able to get at it, but other people don't. So that's key there. And then we also have what we call is our deck, which is the social hour. So we meet at end of the day Friday, and sometimes that's 8 o'clock at night, because that's when the people from India can join us, and or we meet at 5 when it's just the U.S., whatever. So we can meet whenever we want, and we have an hour of just kind of chit chat, kind of winding down the week and figuring out what's going on. So I think what the point of the matter here is that with the idea of an office space like this, you can actually conduct business, because people go into their office at the beginning of their day and they're available. And so you can, move your cursor, move your mouse down the path and knock on their door, and they can tell you to go away. They can tell you to come in. You can look and see if they've got somebody in their office with them, because we have little avatars that show up. for each individual that's in an office. And it gives them an extra level of understanding of when they can meet with somebody, and it really improves communication. So I think that this is certainly something to consider, and it is non-COVID-19 free. So you don't have to worry about COVID-19 with this. You can continue do your work. Now, you're not going to be able to make product in this, but you are going to be able to conduct regular office activities. So I think this is something we see to be very important. But more fundamentally, it's that we have the ability to know who's coming in, because we have a universal identity certificate for each person that enters that office.
Before you move on, John, there is a comment that came in, and it's actually the same one that was asked the first time I saw this presentation, and it's how does this differ from like a Microsoft Teams type environment? And the answer is that lobby, correct?
Right.
And it's really, with Teams or any of the other situations out there, you don't necessarily know that that person is coming into the office. You know that someone with that username and password is coming into the office. Whereas with this solution, the lobby kind of uses the certificate to weed out the people and make sure they are who they say they are.
Yep, that's right. Thank you, George. So moving along, back here, I would like to, as we wrap this up, I'd like you to remember a couple things. And if you remember these 4 points, it's pretty good. Digital signatures everywhere, backed by measurable, reliable identity certificates that are owned by their users, which provide privacy and accountable anonymity. So that's what I would like you to remember as you go through this. When you think about that and think about the security that you have today as you move forward. I'd like you to think about that authenticity works where security technologies have failed us. And you can learn more about the Authenticity Institute at whatisauthenticity.com. There's a series of videos that explain different aspects of what I talked about this afternoon. And if you have any questions or want to talk further, we can open to questions right now.
If anybody has a question out there, just leave it in the comments, and we'll discuss it now. I'm not seeing anything come up. One question that I have is, is there a plan right now to productize these? And, is there an availability schedule? How will these get rolled out to even companies like mine, where we provide security, to our business clients? How can we start using this technology?
PKIDR is very close to, as of this morning, is very, very, very close to our first release, and that's a pretty comprehensive demo situation. So I would think by the first of the year we would start to see some beta releases on it. And as in all things, if you want to get involved early, someone wants to get involved earlier, we'll work through that. But I would expect that would be when it would be. In terms of productizing it, making it available, we are looking at certain industries. The first one that we're really looking at is the Abex Properties, which is the placeware, because if we can put that on the market, that gives us a bit of a head start on some of the other organizations. I think particularly PKIDR Wallet, to be able to get rid of the passwords would be wonderful for me, because my Excel sheet now is well over 300 and some lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a password on it, George, but I have to have the password on the password.
Yeah, I can say from my point of view, I look forward to something like that, just because I can show you the number of tickets we have to close a week. That's nothing more than password resets.
Yeah.
People have forgotten. So yeah, I think there's a real place in the market for a product like that.
Yeah.
And, I'm certainly looking forward to trying it out.
So the way this comes about is that we develop, the Authenticity Institute develops the technology, and then we look for entrepreneurs who might be interested in well, right, who might be interested, who would be interested, but also have deep understanding of a particular vertical market. So in the case of the placeware, who are we talking to? We want to talk to people that are in the commercial real estate market.
Okay.
Because as this kind of thing, not just what we're saying with Avix Property solution, but things like Zoom and other, in fact, what we've got going on right now, which is your StreamYard, people are going to meet like that, and people are getting used to working out of the home. They're also not missing, and I don't know how many of you commute long distances, but I used to commute to Waltham every day for 13 years. And before that, I commuted down to West Bridgewater. That's not a lot of fun on 128. Yeah. So people are looking at it that I can get back an hour, 3 hours of time that I normally would have spent on the road, which wasn't very productive. So this is something people are looking at. And I think that the challenge is going to be is what's going to happen with some of these large commercial office buildings when they don't find them being re-rented again. Right. So I think that's the first market that we're really looking at. As soon as it's releasable, I'm going to get it, because I want to certainly get rid of the password. My Excel spreadsheet make you happy. Make my son happy too, because every time he looks at it, he says, "Dad, you can't be doing that again and again." But that's kind of the gist of it. The other one that we are offering is something kind of interesting in that if you want to share encrypted documents, right? So you can go to a group that will store your document on a server in encrypted form, and then you can get at it because you have a password. But if you want to share it with somebody else, how do you get them a password that they can do the same thing with? Right. So that enters into, again, a PKIDR. What we would give them on a smartphone. They would go through an enrollment process, and then they would be able to share them back and forth. And that way you absolutely know who you've given access to these documents. So you've taken all the trouble to encrypt them and store them on a server, but now you want to get access to them with somebody else, and that would be what you would try to do. So we call that AuthentiCloud, but that is a new offering that is coming along with this as well. Excellent. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity, George, and hope that people found this entertaining, if not, but educational.
Yeah, I think it's like I said, I think it's a really just an interesting topic and something that is definitely future forward thinking, and where we're going next with cybersecurity and authentication. So I really appreciate you taking the time and being on today. And we ended up with quite a few viewers. The videos will also be posted on the PC Dynamix blog, the IBN networking website blog, as well as the other social media channels for those organizations. John, again, thank you. I appreciate it. And everyone else out there, have a great day. Have a happy Halloween, and have a great weekend.
Okay. Thank you very much, George.